Paul Keating. Cabinet papers look back on election Labour should have lost. It was regarded as the unlosable election, for the coalition that is, and perhaps no one was more surprised than Labour Prime Minister Paul Keating as polling night unfolded. Cabinet documents for 1992 and 1993, released by the National Archives, reflect on the Paul Keating years. Far from losing, there was a 5.5% swing to Labour, which increased its majority by 2 to 13 seats in Parliament's lower house. The result was mostly down to Keating's energetic campaigning against Liberal leader John Hewson's goods and services, a bit rich in the circumstances considering Keating had long favoured such an impost as a necessary economic reform to broaden Australia's tax base. Cabinet documents for 1992 and 1993, released by the National Archives of Australia, revealed there were plenty of reasons why Labour should have lost. For one thing, Keating had replaced the popular Bob Hawke on his second leadership bid in December 1991. Labour wasn't in great shape. Don Watson, who became Keating's speechwriter, recalled a pervasive fatigue and a sense that after 9 years, Labour's agenda had been completed. Archives historical consultant Nicholas Brown said Keating, as Hawke's treasurer, had been charismatic, pushing an economic reform agenda which was likely to win respect but not popularity. Keating went into 1992 with a personal approval rating of just 25%. That would sink to 17% in August 1993, making him the least popular of all recent PMs. By comparison, Julia Gillard's popularity bottomed at 23%, Tony Abbott at 24%, while Malcolm Turnbull hit 34%. The economy was doing Keating no favors. Unemployment rose to 11%, it's now 5.7%, and the deficit blew out to more than $5 billion, now more than $30 billion. Hewson released his ambitious economic reform policy in November 1991, still remembered because of his proposed GST and the catchy title, Fight Back. In February 1992, Keating released his own visionary economic policy, now mostly forgotten, not least because of its title, One Nation. From this era, Keating is perhaps better remembered for his assertive Australian nationalism than for the accompanying economic reforms. He talked of Australian independence free of the British Empire and declared Australia would have a new flag by 2000. Still, Keating was civil to the monarchy, welcoming Queen Elizabeth in her 1992 visit, but earning the opprobrium of the British tabloid press and the title The Lizard of Oz for placing a guiding arm around Her Majesty during one civic function. Keating called the election for March 13, 1993. The campaign featured two events which have gone down in Australian election lore, both involving the coalition's proposed GST and cake. On March 3, Hewson was interviewed by Nine's Mike Willesee, who asked how the GST would apply to a birthday cake. Many date Hewson's election loss to his fumbling answer. Seeking to capitalize on his opponent's cake woes, Keating ventured into a pie shop in Bamatary, on the NSW's south coast, at the instigation of the Labour candidate Peter Knott. As the PM held up a cake, the owner told the gleeful media he could expand his business and employ more people if he didn't have to pay state payroll tax plus wholesale sales tax on cake ingredients, which was pretty much what Hewson had in mind. Keating seethed. Inside Labour, this became known as the Great Pie Ship disaster. According to press gallery legend, the acerba Keating subsequently referred to Knott as the C from the cake shop. Russia's spy ring. It also emerged the Keating government was told a Russian spy ring had penetrated ACO ranks. The collapse of the Soviet Union just 2 years earlier meant the West was still gripped by Cold War fever when Keating was told about the spy ring. Censored intelligence briefings from 1992 to 93 reveal fears that Russia was listening to confidential conversations, the Daily Telegraph revealed. Among the top-secret documents were the warning that Russia's Foreign Intelligence Agency, SVR, bugged and hacked into communication systems. We committed the murders. But perhaps Keating's enduring achievements from this era relate to Indigenous affairs. On December 10, 1992, Keating made his watershed Redfern speech in a park in inner-city Sydney, marking a fundamental shift in the troubled relationship between Indigenous and white Australia. As complex as our contemporary identity was, it could not be separated from Aboriginal Australia, he said. We committed the murders. We took the children from their mothers. We practiced discrimination and exclusion. It was our ignorance and our prejudice. The speech straddled two significant events, both relevant today. In April 1991, the final report of the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody was released. It had been launched in 1987 to examine why so many Indigenous people were dying in jail and police custody. It found no difference in the death rate of Indigenous and non-Indigenous prisoners, but more Indigenous prisoners were dying because of their disproportionately high rate of arrest and incarceration. Since then, the death rate has fallen, but Indigenous incarceration rates have doubled. On June 3, 1992, the High Court delivered its judgment in Mabo v Queensland, a complex case in which judges rejected the doctrine of terra nullius, that no one owned the land of Australia when the first European settlers arrived, in favor of native title over land. This was politically enormously difficult. Labor introduced the Native Title Act in 1993, which created a national tribunal to determine claims. The coalition fought this legislation tooth and nail, with the Senate only passing the legislation on December 21, 1993 after a marathon sitting which ran for 56 hours and 8 minutes. Hewson declared this a day of shame. The Sydney Morning Herald said Mabo could be judged the most profound achievement of Paul Keating's political career.